welcome to this video where I will go into status functionality. Status is a way of keeping track of your items, occurrences, products or systems to find out where they are in a work process or a milestone process, so you can easily get an overview and track all the entities that you might want to track. So to create the statuses, you will need to be an administration user. And when you are, you can go to administration and settings, and under project you will find both classification and you will find status. So the status is a bit similar to classification, although there are a few additional features connected to it. So in this video I will create two examples of a set of statuses. And I will first create the first one. I hit add and I need to give my status a name. So I will first create a status for a specification process for items. So I can track where in the workflow the different items are. So I'll call this for simply specification, and then I need to define where I want my status to be valid, and I will check for items because I want this status to be set for the items in my database. So I can hit OK, and then I'm finished setup for my specification workflow. I will also add additional one, which I will call for milestones, to be able to track both items, occurrences, in which milestones in the project they are placed in. So this one will be for items and occurrences, and I will also add some additional checkboxes here. I will say that this is supposed to be sequential. That means when you define a list of statuses, which I will show you in a little while, the end user of dRofus will only be able to select the next status in the sequence. And I will explain that a little bit more once we get into the items overview. I will also add a due date. So I can set a date to each status, so it will be more easy for me to track and find the different items and occurrences that's supposed to be finished in different dates. So I will say OK to this, and I will save my setup, and that's it for the admin settings. I can just close this window and move over to the items overview. If I expand this a little bit, you can see that I have some item groups. I have, for instance, some furnitures here. I have building elements. I have different kinds of disciplines items all collected in this database. If I go to furnitures first, I have a list of items here. If I click on this work table, for instance, and if we move over to the properties pane, you will see under the label classification, you will see also that we have added my specification status and my milestone status. So the statuses will not be placed in a separate section in the properties, but they will be part of the classification section together with, in this case, omni-class, system numbering, or other classifications that you might use in your project. So if I select a work table, I can now go to, for instance, specifications, click on the dotted option here, and now you can see I have specification, but I haven't yet defined a set of statuses under specification. That's the first thing I need to do. And to do that, I'll go to the tab here, which is my new status. I click on the main level, and then I have a specification option in my ribbon menu, which I can say I want a new status, and I will quickly create a few statuses for specification. In this case, I have 4 statuses under my status type specification. I can define when an item is created. I can give it the status created. When we start the specification process of adding data to the items, I can set it to in specification. When I'm done with my specification, when it's ready for design, for instance, I can set it to specification finished. And when it's accepted by, for instance, the end user or the owner of the project, I can then set it to accepted. So these are just examples of different statuses we can set to the items. If we move over to the items group, that's the grouping I want to use as navigation. If we go back to the work table and go to specification, you can see now we can start to pick a status that we just created. And I can set that as created. I can also, okay, I'm going to save that. I can also do some multiple select from my items pane and go to specification and activate that one and set all of these items in status in specification. I can continue that process also for a few more items. Do multiple edit, go to specification, and I will set these as specification finished and hit OK and save. So there's a few ways that we can navigate the statuses. The first one is of course to just add it as a column to my items pane. So I can do that by right click, go to add remove columns, and I can scroll down to the specification status, and I can add properties for the specification. So what I want is the code, so I'm going to add the code. I will add the name, and yeah, that's it for this one. I can also choose to remove something from my column view, like this. So now you can see that I have my status directly as a column in my items pane, which I can use to sort and navigate. The other way of navigating the statuses is to go to the tab called specification. If I click on one of these statuses, you will see which items are connected to the different statuses. If we go to the other status type I created called milestones, we can also create a few statuses here. In this case, I will just give the same codes, and I will give it a name called the first one for pre-project. And since I added a due date in the admin settings, I will now be able to set a date and relate this to the status. So I click on the date symbol and I say that these milestones should be completed 4th of April, for instance. And now you can see we both have the code, the name, and the date all available as information on the status. So we'll quickly create a few more here. So now I have created 5 different statuses for milestones. I have pre-project, I have planning, detailed planning, building process, and tested and accepted. So if I go back to my items group, and if I go to my building elements, for instance a few walls, I can set milestones to each of the items. So let's go to the milestones, dotted line here, and say these are in planning. Maybe other doors are in building process, and I can find a few doors, for instance, and set these to be in detail planning, for instance. So now I have tagged items to my milestones. I have also a due date for each milestones. So if I go to milestone status type, I can now start to navigate the different statuses, find out which items that belongs to a certain status. If I select an occurrence, you will also find that this milestone status is also available for the occurrences. So you can overwrite what's on the type with what's on the occurrence. So different occurrences of a type can have different statuses, and it can differ also from the type. So this type is in detail planning, but this occurrence specifically is tested and accepted. When you work with due dates, you can also use the advanced search to find different items and occurrences that are tagged to a due date. So in this case, I want to search for items. I will search in the milestones category, and if I find a due date is before, or I can say is after or equals. So I will find all items and occurrences that has a due date before July the 5th, for instance, and do a search. And then I get an overview of all the items that matches my search criteria, and also the occurrences. So that's a few ways of utilizing the statuses in your project, and feel free to experiment with it. Thank you.